I would now like to introduce today's presenters. Michael Benton, Chief Research Officer, guides the practice's research agenda and architecture by leveraging his extensive experience to identify and unlock emerging trends. Rajesh Ranjan, Partner, leads Everest Group Business Process Services Syndicated and Advisory Practice globally. He is responsible for the overall growth of the practice in terms of revenues, client relationship management, market influence, and talent mentoring. Prashant Shukla, Vice President, leads Everest Group's financial research practice, which includes its Executive Insights program for CXOs within IT and business process service provider organizations. And with that, I'd like to turn things over to Michael.
Thank you, Peter. Happy New Year's if we haven't already spoken. Welcome to the new year. And today we're going to move into our continuing series on our 2022 key issues. Late last year, we did a kind of an overview of the most important issues to enterprises in this segment for those that are concerned about this industry. I think here is going to put that in the chat window, that if you're interested in copying down that link and watch the kind of the overview of 2022 key issues, you can watch that later. But today we're here live, and we're going to be focused in on the BPS segment. So if we're going to try to drive down into understanding the issues that are focused in on this specific stakeholder group, and try to identify those actions that we are thinking that are going to be the best to unlock the value in 2022. So with that, let's start with one macro level kind of insight from the original analysis. And we're really focusing on this slide here is those key business challenges that we're seeing in 2022. Traditionally, that has kind of always been the number one issue, has been focusing on the adapting to new business models. That's really been where folks are thinking about how do they adapt their e-commerce solution or their digital enablement business operations plans, and think of how they become more competitive. But as you can see here, the talent and skills shortages has rocketed from number 5 to number 1. And I think that's going to be something that as we talk about further into the analysis and the insights over the next few months here, we're going to drill down deeper in on that talent skills shortage, but it's going to be part of the analysis that you see here too. So, but with that, let's kind of focus in on the BPS 4.0 model. And with that, Rajesh, can you kind of talk to us about what this is and why it's important in the upcoming year? Rajesh, you're on mute.
Yeah. Hey, absolutely. Thanks, Michael. So as Michael mentioned and highlighted, some of the top issues and issues and challenges that organizations are facing. And if we reflect upon some of these, the talent skills shortage, adapting to the new business model, what should be our price and cost structure to offer the right products and services in the marketplace that we operate in. These are fundamental issues, right? And for these fundamental issues, what one requires is a transformative approach, and is an approach which is different than what a legacy approach has been. And that is the place the BPS 4.0 model kicks in. And one of the important things is to kind of start from, hey, what is the outcome that we're trying to achieve, right? And that is the place the key value proposition of BPS 4.0 becomes central. So I'll spend a little bit of time on that, and then kind of talk about some of the levers, the key levers that we see need to come in play in an orchestrated manner to realize those objectives, those value propositions. So let's first talk about exponential efficiencies across the board. Now, two things that I want to highlight here: exponential and across the board. Efficiency has always been part of BPS, but the need is a step change in capturing those efficiencies. And the need is impacting that on a larger, much wider real estate. The second one, active contribution to business outcomes. Again, this is different from legacy BPS value proposition, which has largely been centered around cost, targeting the mid office and back office. Now there's an opportunity and a need, right, as organizations trying to kind of rethink their fundamental business model and so on and so forth, to impact the top line, the market share. And as we do some of these things, and at what COVID has taught us, and the future, the way it looks like, which will continue to be volatile, the resiliency and agility with lower risk is another key value proposition that we need to keep in mind that enterprises should expect. Contribution to ESG agenda has really, the ESG agenda is now a boardroom agenda. So how, as we do all of these, how do we contribute towards that? How we help achieve some of those objectives become important. And last but not the least, as we try to achieve all these objectives, creating a superior stakeholder experience remains paramount. And again, emphasis here is on stakeholder, not employee, not customer, a wide variety of stakeholders. And then what are those levers? And we'll talk about some of these levers in terms of how and why these are the action items that we are suggesting. So I'm not going to go into detail of these right now, but just to kind of reflect back a little, if you look at the levers which are highlighted in blue text, these are the levers which were kind of present even in the previous business BPS model. What changes is the pervasiveness of these and the transformation that it needs to bring because of the pervasiveness of all the things that we do under BPS. And then there are new levers that have emerged, part of that driven by COVID, part of that driven by the talent shortage, what Michael highlighted. And as he said, we'll dig deeper into it. And then the other one is around this BP DevOps oriented, which may be cryptic, and I'll leave it cryptic as of now, because again, this is something where we are going to deal in a much more focused manner. I don't want to kind of steal some of those thunder right away. So yeah, I mean, I just wanted to kind of paint this before we start getting to the action items.
All right, so I'll have to wait to hear about what BP DevOps oriented means. I was going to ask that question of you, Rajesh, but you're heading me off at the pass there. All right, let's look at where you think the key value propositions up. So we're going to start with a quick poll where we're going to ask you, what do you think are the most important of those elements that Rajesh just covered here? And we'd ask you to choose up to 2 of them, and we've broken out the experience lever into 3. So we've broken it into employee experience, customer experience, partner experience. But go ahead right now and click your choice in terms of what you think is going to be the most important value propositions as we move forward. All right, we've got a good amount of responses already coming in here, Rajesh. All right, we'll leave it open for another 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And all right, let's go ahead and close it out. Okay, so it's pretty obvious we do have a couple of those that really kind of move to the front of the line here. Active contribution to business outcomes, which is also closely related to a superior customer experience. They are clearly leading. Any thoughts there, Rajesh?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not surprised, and actually possibly kudos to the audience here, right? Because part of BPS 4.0 value proposition is around this, active contribution to business outcome. That is what has, I mean, again, if you think about it, efficiency, agility, some of those elements were there. I'm somewhat surprised by, the lower percentage feeling contribution to the ESG agenda, right? Because at one level or other, I do feel that coming into the conversation possibly will increase in the conversation. But of course, I understand that this is kind of, one has to pick top two, right? So, and then again, the last thing that I would say here is active contribution to business outcome and superior customer experience are very interlinked.
Yeah, and the other 2 there are the exponential efficiencies across the board. Let's not forget what this industry was based upon. It was based upon driving operating improvements and cost efficiencies. So that'll never go out of style, in my opinion. One I did want to highlight there, Rajesh, is really that superior employee experience. And I think that's going to be a question mark as we get further into the year and the talent shortages become more endemic, not just in this industry, but across both specifically Europe and North America, where we're seeing record high job openings and record low unemployment or near record low unemployment here in the US, and similar in Europe is starting to show up. I expect there could be a potential for a pivot here from the superior customer experience to the superior employee experience as we go through and realize that, what, people are going to sacrifice the customer experience if they can't get an employee experience. And I'm seeing that right now as a customer. It's quite clear in the retail environment and some other segments of our economy that that's exactly what's happening. So watch for that one. But when you find yourself doing self-service for everything, you realize they're doing that not because they want to make you do all the work. It's just they don't have the employees or the talent to make it happen on their side. So I think you're going to see a lot more of that going forward here. Okay, so we'll keep an eye on that one. Let's move on to the core of the presentation today, which is really getting into those 5 success driving actions. And what I wanted to do is start with the first one here, which is that multi-pronged strategy to address this talent issue. So Prashant, why don't you come in here and talk a little bit about some of the scope and scale of the challenge that we're seeing here, and we'll put that in play and talk about how we think that's going to evolve.
Absolutely. Thank you, Michael. So let's double click and understand on what the stakeholders are truly worried about. So what you see here is output of our recent key issues study, which clearly established that the talent-related challenges are prevalent in BPS segments. So as you can see, 3 of top 5 challenge segments were from BPS. And frankly, what makes BPS talent situation particularly tricky is that these roles vary across experience levels. So for example, you can see in this chart that the challenge within BPS is both at associate level, which has less than 2 years of experience, as well as senior associate level, which is 2 to 6 years of experience. So that's the case with the BPS functions. But when you look at the IT functions or maybe engineering services functions, this challenge seems to be more prominent at the senior associate level. The second important thing to note here is that the nature of these functions are varied in BPS, right? So the challenges are in segments involving judgment-intensive work, as well as technology-involved functional skills. So the key implication, BPS talent challenge is more pervasive versus other areas of services. And frankly, in the next slide, you'll see that the global talent scramble has differentiated region-wide implications as well.
Yeah, and Prashant, I think one of the things to think about here is also the implications of the data you just went through here. It's becoming more pervasive across the board on more functions, but it's also starting to result in increasing salaries and out of cycle rate increase request from the service providers for commercial billing rates. And so it's not just an interesting phenomenon that says, hey, I'm having a hard time with my job openings. It's starting to have economic implications as well. So when you look at it from a regionality standpoint, a region perspective, it's not just limited to, hey, it's just the US, it's not just Europe, it's also including India and spreading across the world. We've been doing a lot of work on some of the population demographics, and because we're seeing the demographics actually start to decline, see an increasing decline in number of new workers coming into the marketplace, it's only going to get worse.
And Michael, if I were to just add, right, to the point that you mentioned, hey, the rising wage, right, wages, we will talk about that in terms of what it means for us or enterprises to think on the commercial model then, right? What is the right strategy and right consideration one has to have?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of implications to how we price deals and how we think about the recruitment of talent, and we may go back to that whole, what are we doing to improve the employee experience to retain the talent so that we don't spend a lot of time and money trying to find talent that's walked out the door. All right, Prashant, let's break this down into a little more detail in terms of some of the sectors that you specifically look at.
Yes, absolutely, Michael. And while this is a different flavor, right? It's a different dimension. So while there's a big focus on the ongoing talent scramble, one must not forget the undercurrents, so to say. So even before all of this current talent crisis started, our research uncovered fundamental gaps in next generation skills. Now, so with the BPS value proposition switching gears, the need for advanced skills in analytics, problem solving, and something like digital tools has been ever accelerating. Right? And that's what we are showing in these two examples. So now, as you see on the left-hand side, which is the CXM, that's the biggest, customer experience management, the biggest and arguably the most mature segment, is witnessing the need for high proficiency over the next 2 to 3 years. So now customer service is about experience, and what we found through this research was that leveraging digital tools, solving problems, are the key areas which need biggest enhancements in proficiency skills. You'll see similar trends on the industry vertical example on the right-hand side, which is insurance, where you'll see that the extent of skill gap is higher, and next generation skill sets, well, they are the ones where you see the maximum gap. So I think as one thinks about the solutions, tapping alternate channels and locations is the key. So as you'll see in the next slide, we'll talk about what all remedies we can take for these basic challenges.
Hey, thanks, Prashant, for laying out the issue. Clearly, one has to take a multi-pronged approach and strategy, right? So on this page, we are kind of talking about a couple of them, right? And we'll go deeper into some of it as well, and then we'll try to summarize. The first one is really our ability to tap onto what we are calling alternative talent pool. The pool that does not work or is available in quote unquote BPS industry or BPS, area, right? And that is the place where we have to look at talent that is available in the core industry, right? Where they can, how can we attract that talent for the possibilities and their own career growth and aspirations, right? So that's one. Clearly, there's an opportunity to rethink about the employment arrangement mix. And as you can see, majority of BPS stakeholders do believe that a gig workforce, right, independent contractor gig workforce will be an important component of the talent as we move forward. Clearly, COVID created this hybrid location situation, rather more work from home location model. But increasing number of, or most of the, enterprises believe that the future is going to be hybrid. Of course, the shape, the extent, the location, some of those things are yet to be fully figured out, but going to be an important component of that. And speaking of, again, location, and, as Michael was highlighting, some of the talent issues in North America, Europe, India, it becomes imperative for us to kind of think about, hey, what are the other locations that we can tap onto from a talent perspective? Yeah, Prashant.
Absolutely, and and this is sort of a logical answer to it, Rajesh. And so as enterprises and service providers try to keep up with this talent and skills gap, one of the key themes emerging you're seeing is where to get the talent, right? And we are observing that the BPS delivery location options are moving beyond the usual suspects, which are India and Philippines. And the focus is now turning to several emerging locations across the globe, be it further exploration of talent in East Europe or Latin America, right? So as you'll see in this chart, we have identified, our locations team has identified emerging locations. Now, that's where the money lies. So let me take an example of an emerging location, Jamaica, right? So Jamaica already has some existing voice and non-voice contact center operations. It is significantly underpenetrated and it has solid potential to expand there, especially to support Americas, given their English-speaking talent. But our locations research also uncovered that beyond contact center, Jamaica has potential to expand service delivery to judgment-based services like complex F&A and HR functions. So essentially, the location strategy, including like fast exploration and early movements and investments, will act as one of the key determinants of success for BPS stakeholders in the coming months. So with that, let's open it. So what are the key imperatives for the organization going ahead?
Yeah. So, in this particular page, what we will try to do, or what I will try to do, is to kind of summarize some of the things that we talked about and possibly add a couple of them. Right? Clearly, it's a very critical, going back to the employee experience part of the equation that Michael was highlighting earlier. Comprehensive talent management across the hire to retire cycle becomes very important to retain, very important to cross skill, upskill, to kind of again address some of the talent consideration, as well as to address the nature of work that is changing and will likely change more. And that leads to the requirement to be really innovative in terms of thinking through how and where work gets done. And when we talk about how, remember, it's a combination of how can we harness the advancement in technology and fuse that with human ingenuity. We call it the combination of tech and touch, right? So that is, there's a need to innovate there, continue to innovate there. Now, of course, where work gets done is part of the hybrid and location, all those things that we're talking about. The third point is very important. I was kind of talking about the tapping onto alternative talent pool, going to different locations, and so on and so forth, all valid strategies and considerations. But as an industry, we have to be thinking about creating net new talent as well. I mean, a lot of people in BPS are not there by design, honestly, right? And hence there's an opportunity and a need to create a much more deeper engagement with academia to kind of pave that or create that supply chain of talent that as an industry we have not done that much. Of course, all of these will require agile and flexible workforce strategies, wherein the contingent or gig workforce that I was talking about is going to be very critical and important component as we think about the total talent part of the equation. And we have to be thinking about total talent.
Yeah, Rajesh, I think you're hitting it right on the nose there. This is traditionally, we've been talking about talent shortages, but we were really referring to the high-end digital talent. But now it's becoming endemic, and so it's become everybody's challenge, if you will. One of the things I did over the holidays was take a virtual tour of Africa. And we actually have an upcoming session on LinkedIn Live where we're actually going to do a focus in on some of the different geographies and locations that you should be considering going forward here. And so I think there's a link in the chat. Yeah, there is. There's a link in the chat there that if you're interested in that upcoming session next Thursday, please join us there. All right, let's move on. So the answer to both improving the output and the outcomes for the customer experience and probably the employee experience, and also a big lever in demand reduction for talent. So actually, how do you remove the overall demand needs, focuses on that technology. And so we can go solve multiple angles to the solution by deploying the technology solution. So Prashant, talk to us about what you're seeing there and how much of a reality that is.
Absolutely, Michael. And this is one of the things which needs the most attention, if I may, right? I mean, let me try to make it a little real, right? So the technology capabilities have evolved immensely, as we are all aware. They provide a lot of potential for very strong ROI for organizations. However, the adoption is still far from leveraging the true potential of these capabilities. So let's take an example of one of the most talked about cases of technology adoption, which is automation, right? Most of the people would agree that that's where technology adoption was, like that's the first stage of technology adoption. So now the automation adoption curve, right? And before I come to the data here, let me talk you through 3 stages of maturity and automation on technology adoption. The first stage, that's a basic stage, is that of task automation. So, which is essentially automating transactional and repetitive activities or tasks to reduce manual effort, where the primary technology is standalone RPA. Well, you advance a little bit, you go to the second stage of adoption, which is process automation, where automating judgment-intensive processes is involved, and that induces technology which goes beyond RPA, and that's where RPA starts interacting and intersecting with artificial intelligence-based solutions, for example, something like an IDP, the intelligent document processing. Third and the most influential adoption stage, arguably, of automation is that of intelligent automation at scale, right? And this is important. The reason it is influential is because it essentially transforms the way enterprises think about their operations. And it has a potential to create opportunities to reimagine the organization businesses beyond plain vanilla cost and operational improvements. Now, the key to success in intelligent automation at scale is the integration of technology, processes, and people. This involves technology beyond AI and integrates ancillary technologies like process mining and process orchestration. So with that context, let me come to what we are seeing here in this slide, right? So our latest study suggests that almost all the tech deployments across enterprises are focused on the first two, which is the task and process automation related technologies. So you'll see standalone RPA. Now, a lot of them are doing AI, and there's a standalone AI as well. However, when we started collating evidence for intelligent automation at scale investments like process orchestration and process mining, the general adoption seemed to be very low and basic, right? And those are the two data points which you see at the bottom, right? I mean, the share of investments in something like process orchestration is just 22%, even for the mature enterprises. And it's worse for when it comes to process mining solutions. It's just 4 to 7% of investments by these organizations. Well, that's what the case is, right? And there are very valid reasons for this, as we'll see in the next slide. Now, the next generation technology adoption, right, around something like intelligent automation at scale, calls for embedding it in organizations' DNA, so to say. So intelligent automation at scale aims to provide organization-wide impact. And this needs buy-ins from all the key strategic functions of an organization. Well, that seems to be the biggest challenge, right? This was kind of evident in our survey when we asked organizations about this. So the key barriers for scaling automation, the first one being roadblocks from compliance and security. Well, what we found was that for such initiatives, you need buy-ins from IT security functions as well as compliance functions. And this survey suggests that that seems to be the biggest impediment. And also, if you observe the other top challenges in this survey, which was access to right talent, right change management strategy, all point to kind of a central issue, which is organization-wide conviction and confidence in such tech adoption initiatives. This is something which clearly needs a top-down change in perceiving value from latest technologies.
No, thanks, Prashant. So, one of the things that we try to kind of also figure out how some of the mature enterprises, what a mature enterprise are doing. So of course, they're doing a lot of stuff through what we call a combination of, again, hybrid, right? Stuff that they do on themselves, but the places where they leverage the expertise that is available in terms of third-party service providers, right? So some of the areas where we see mature enterprises who are getting more value out of it, differ from typical enterprises, are around, how to kind of think about the COE design, how to kind of take the right technology advisory approach, right? When it comes to change management, as you kind of further move down, and as Prashant was highlighting, not much of a difference between mature enterprise and typical enterprise, because some of these things that, hey, as a organization, we have to own. Yes, we can we take help from third-party providers, leverage their experience of working with multiple other clients in similar situation? Yes, but we have to own it. And while we talked a lot about automation, intelligent automation, for very valid reasons, especially in the BPS space, we got to make sure that we are thinking of the technology leverage and intervention in the BPS, in the operations space, in a holistic manner, right? And that is the place where what we see the need for a composable digital capability platform emerge. And there are two key elements here, right? One is, how do we kind of put together various elements that Prashant was also alluding to again orchestrate some of these things to capture the value we are seeking, right? And what are the value that we are seeking? Again, greater performance, greater insight, greater efficiency, better stakeholder experience. And did we talk about some of these things right up front? Yes, we did. That is BPS 4.0. The next question is, hey, do I need to do everything on my own? Actually, the answer is no. As an enterprise, yes, you have made certain investments and possibly on the right tools and technologies. You need to leverage that. You need to harness that. You also work with service providers, and a lot of these service providers have made some significant investments in creating very purpose-fit, domain-specific, function-specific solution. So how do we kind of leverage? How do we kind of gain the benefit of those investments as we are working with our service provider partners? Last but not the least, continue to look at the broader innovation ecosystem, right? And pull that in to kind of create this composable digital capability platform. Again, this is not about one monolithic system, clearly not. It is about creating a solution that is fit for purpose, that is not clunky. Yes, integration and hands-offs are very, very important. But again, the approach that we require here is really leveraging the entire ecosystem to be able to achieve some of those objectives that we have in mind.
So Rajesh, that gets a little complicated. I mean, there's literally hundreds of logos that could be associated with service providers and SaaS vendors in this segment. So I know your team tracks a lot of that. So it's always get fascinated by the slide and think about all the implications to it.
Yeah. And again, on that point, hey, Michael, one of the suggestions that we offer to enterprises who work with a lot of these enterprise clients is, hey, don't go for the best and shiny thing, right? That is the place where you ought to, again, look at what you have, what will really fit seamlessly and meet the objectives that you have with the right ROI, versus kind of, sometimes I do see enterprises get enamored by this next big shiny thing because it's kind of creating a lot of noise. It has those funky bells and whistles. So I'm a great believer in technology, but again, I tend to kind of look at it from what is the business outcome that you're trying to achieve and which one is really going to fit in here versus, something which is superstar on their own or a standalone basis.
Yeah, there's some words we use internally about a big pile of technology, steaming pile of technology. All right, let's move on to the pricing. And this is one I've always been fascinated with in terms of my personal career. I started out doing pricing on deals. So I always looked at it, deal pricing as, hey, you are what you say, your value proposition is what you say on the invoice. And so Rajesh, let's talk about those invoices. What's showing up in the invoice itself? Not what was it the marketing pitch, but what are you buying every month?
Yeah, essentially, if you look at it, just a clarification, guys, when we say input based, this is essentially FTE based, meaning how many people are working for you. Output based is basically transaction based, how many invoices you're getting your service provider partner to process. And when it comes to some of the outcome oriented, that is going to start to link to the business outcome. But the key thing here is, while all the conversation is great, as you see from this data, and this is taken again from the most mature CCO contact center area, a large part of the commercial construct continues to be FTE based. How many bodies that I can count, right? And yeah, we do it for the sake of, I hear transparency and whatnot, right? But clearly, from my perspective, and from our perspective, the key question is, are we missing the woods for the trees? Right? Especially when you start to think about leveraging tools and technology that you can harness with your service provider, right? And then that is a place where we need to kind of start evolving our thinking in terms of what creates the better outcome, most impactful outcome than the transparency. And by the way, you can still get transparency in other models as well, which Prashant will kind of talk about. But yeah, I mean, that's the reality. That's the current reality.
Hey, Rajesh, I want to just point out something, and I'm going to date myself here a little bit. Up until we started doing some of the labor arbitrage to India and other low-cost locations, the predominant billing mechanism was transactional pricing, or the output-based pricing. That was like 90% of the deals were done that way. And so it's you know, I think we can. This is one where a back to the future is going to be a good thing for the industry.
Yeah.
As we widely agree that the TCO linked pricing models, the total cost of operation, there are significant benefits, right? And I will not go through all of these. It's very quickly. What I'll say is that the first two in this exhibit, that is the optimized delivery cost and the risk minimization, are pretty intuitive. But the important ones to focus on are the other three. So it truly incentivizes service providers to maximize their benefits. They tend to do this by investing in technology and innovation to reduce their own costs, right? Everyone wants to increase their margins. Secondly, as part of the improving value proposition of overall cost of operations, like I have to win, they have a particular focus on enhancing customer experience. And last but not the least, it surely simplifies and aligns goals of clients, right? I mean, which is TCO reduction. So all the goals and action steps are naturally synchronized across the stakeholders in a TCO-based model. So what we have done here is in the next slide, just to elaborate on the cost reduction, right? We have done a very quick and basic analysis to show how TCS-linked pricing model for next-gen contact center reduces overall cost of operation versus an input-based model. So let me quickly share what these calculations show here. So for the same multi-year CCO contract, a TCO-linked pricing model, with calculations on the right, it reduces the total cost of operation by 12 points. So in this particular example, it reduced the total cost of operation by 12.2% versus input-based pricing contract, which is on the left-hand side. Even when you factor in an 11.8% premium on FTE pricing. So here our assumption of a loaded price per FTE in TCO-linked pricing model, which includes costs associated with technology implementation, yields a significant reduction in total costs of operations. So this ties back to our initial point of this action, which is the TCO-linked pricing model might increase unit costs, but they provide overall cost advantage in a multi-year contract.
No, absolutely, Prashant. I just want to add, we talked about the talent thing, we talked about the tech thing, then we're talking about how to kind of fuse them together in where the rubber meets the road in terms of the commercial model. Yes, when you have the right technology leverage coming some of those things through, your per unit price is going to go up, but you got to look at the bigger picture, right? So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, TCO is a big important concept to really understand here, and especially when it comes to how do we do overall demand reduction in terms of talent. So let's talk about the next area here, capitalizing on increasing outsourcing maturity in traditional and new areas. So I'm going to hit this one really quick here, Rajesh. I want to get to your slide, but there is we talk about some of the macro trends within the enterprise. This is one of the slides from the December presentation that I was referring to earlier. But the bottom line, people are looking to outsource it. So the challenge is if they can't find the talent on an internal or a recruiting basis for themselves, they're going to let somebody else make it have it be somebody else's problem to take care of.
Yeah. And, and that's the place where we are seeing enterprise expanding the scope of outsourcing. And we have taken two examples. One on the left-hand side is an F&A example, which is one of the most mature, outsourcing areas. And when it started, and for a long time, it was largely centered around a lot of those transaction-intensive areas of invoice processing, account receivable, so on and so forth. But as you can see from the data, more enterprises are also tapping on to outsourcing to get the help, expertise, support on judgment-intensive areas like FP&A that we have called out. The second example is around a new area from an outsourcing perspective that have not been tapped much in the past, which is marketing BPS. But as we see, enterprises trying to kind of again put the right marketing operating model in place, not the brand and all those things, but just the operation part of the place. And that's very, very critical, as we think about activating various channels in different geographies, especially for big brands. We are seeing some of them, an increasing number of them, to tap onto, again, the outsourcing part of the equation. Right? So there's two examples of mature and new emerging areas. The key point is look at the increasing maturity across various areas and various areas of outsourcing, and you may have an opportunity to kind of tap onto some of it.
All right, so great conversation so far, but we're only touching the surface here. So if you're interested in a longer conversation with Prashant or Rajesh or their respective teams, we're going to give you an opportunity if you're a buyer or a GBS organization, if you want to drill down and have that more detailed insights and conversations with these two or their teams. Go ahead and click on the quick poll that we have posted up here, and we've broken it actually so you can have two choices. So if you're interested in more detail, click the link there. I'll leave it open for another 7 seconds, and happy to drill down on the topics at hand today. All right, we'll leave it open for another 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, so next topic here, and the last one we're going to cover today is really focusing on the silos and agility. Rajesh, talk to us a little bit more about that topic.
Yeah, and this is the place where I started and kind of left it somewhat enigmatic, which is the BP DevOps, business process DevOps. But guys, at one level, it is kind of simple. Probably a lot of you are familiar with DevOps, which originated in the IT space with the end objective of driving greater agility and time to market by really fusing IT development and IT operations. But we believe that the true agility and speed to market will happen when we further extend that into business process and business process operations, right? And that is the place where we think about really breaking those silos, really creating fully autonomous teams with end-to-end responsibility to build, deploy, and manage services, right? And again, this is kind of fundamental change. This is a big fundamental change compared to other things that we talked about, which are in various form or shapes are already playing out. This is something which is still, I would say, possibly to say embryonic. I know that some organizations starting to do that, they're creating some of those org structure. But at the same time, so it is kind of early in terms of their progress, but at the same time, this is very fundamental, right? As we kind of think about the objectives where we started off BPS 4.0. Right. And then, as we saw, there are multiple moving parts here, right? And to be able to, again, make sure that the whole is greater than the sum of the parts, a very good orchestration is critical. So what we are kind of saying is, hey, when you think about your BPS engagements and all those things, how do you move away from an execution focus to more of orchestration focus? What is the role that you can play? What is the role that you want service providers to play, but in a manner which is not arm's length away, right? Because again, there's so many things that need to come together to achieve those objectives of BPS 4.0.
So Rajesh, if I was able to sum that up here, it really is a tighter integration between the IT and the delivery and development and the ops that is actually going to enable many of the other things we've been talking about earlier in the session.
Yep.
Okay, all right, let's bring this to a summary here. And, as I think about what we've covered in the landscape here in the last 45 minutes or so, really was, really starting to address the talent issue. And I'm passionate about that because I think it's going to become something, it's not just a passing fad, but rather it's endemic. So it's going to really change some of the value propositions that are going to be required in this industry. Obviously, one of the levers that we can pull to solve the talent issue is going to be around technology. Thinking about this in terms of how do you change the pricing elements to help further facilitate that evolution or change that's going to be required to make all this work. and the new areas to look at in the BPS arena. And then as Rajesh said, how are we going to make it operate more? How are we going to make it feasible for the operations to move smoothly? And the answer is probably not going to be hiring more people to implement. So it's going to have to be done in a way that almost drives itself from the existing resource pool. So how does that change management all fit together, Rajesh?
Again, guys, possibly at the cost of repeating myself, these are fundamental changes, right? As an enterprise organization, you have to go through these changes, which by no means we are saying is incremental. This is kind of transformational. And as with any of the change that we require, even for some of the what's so-called incremental change management is so very critical, right? For this kind of a change, this becomes like paramount, right? And of course, there are lot of literature, a lot of research done on change management per se. The way to kind of simplify, in my mind, is kind of really rely on 4 core principles: understand change, plan change, implement change, communicate change, keep on communicating, and possibly communication will keep on happening, right? Our objective in today's session was hopefully provide you some flavor of understand the change. As you go on this journey, other elements will become equally potentially more important.
All right, fantastic wrap up, Rajesh. We try to keep these things really heavy on the data and the insights, but I always like to leave a minute or so for our practice leaders to kind of talk about how they help clients. Rajesh, can you do that in 60 seconds?
Yeah, no, absolutely. We essentially work with enterprises and providers, and our objective is to help them really capture value from the services spent, right? And there are 2 ways in which we do it. One is through our ongoing membership construct, wherein you get access to all the what we believe is market leading research, some of the output that you saw today. So ongoing access to that. On top of it, access to analysts who are researching some of these topics. We're talking to a lot of organizations to kind of also decipher what is behind data and what are those connection points that may not be visible. Of course, we also work with both enterprise and service providers on a project basis, one-on-one client engagements across a variety of issues. With enterprises, it can start from some of the sourcing strategy consideration to evaluating to what extent the BPS engagement is tuned to BPS 4.0, and to what extent they and honestly what should they be doing collaboratively potentially with the existing provider to kind of elevate that, and so on and so forth. Similarly, we work with service providers on their strategy, differentiation, and growth issues.
All right, great. So let's get right to our questions here, and I'm going to take the first one here and let you expand on this question, Rajesh. So the question is, how do you see the trend of offshoring being impacted by the pandemic? I'm going to broaden that perspective a little bit talk about the overall trends we saw in 2021. So we think about 2021, we really saw 3 years in one. 3 major trends all happened in the same year. So really there was it was a buyer's market in the first quarter or so. And then as activity picked up and substantially, we saw a huge amount of proposal activity and things like that, it became a seller's market. So the service providers kind of had the lead on the marketplace. And then toward the last quarter of the year, we really saw the impact on that talent conversation we're having, and it really became an employees market. And so we've seen all 3 seasons happen, or three trends happen in the same year. How is that impacting the offshoring conversation, Rajesh?
Yeah, it's kind of a very interesting because we see twin forces acting here, and these 2 forces are opposing to each other, right? So because at one side, as you saw, customer experience, at least from an enterprise standpoint, and notwithstanding the thing that you talked about, continues to remain important, right? And that is the place where we see enterprises wanting to have some of these delivery happening from onshore, nearshore locations, right? Especially something that is very customer facing. but the fact of the matter is, where's the talent, right? So, you got to go where the talent is. So that is the place where, is like, it's kind of interesting and kind of differs by function. So there's no one clear answer. Differs by function, differs by what organizational priority is. As of now, seems like talent is dictating the choice and the direction. Ideally, I see organization want to have best of at least some good thing of both the worlds. So go to nearshore locations. But yeah, that's the kind of thing that is playing out. But in general, it differs by different functions.
Yeah, it's, again, this aspect is changing by time. So during the early parts of the pandemic, it was move it back onshore and de-risk the platform or just de-risk the operations. But that reality of the risk now is you can't find the talent. It's not about, and so, or you're going to pay a lot for it. So as this gets further into the talent shortage, and Rajesh, I know you've seen some of the charts that we produced on some of the population demographics. The reality is going to be immovable forces in motion, okay, or not in motion, if you will. These are going to come into play here, and so I think that's something to pay close attention to. Like I said, I spent the holidays doing a virtual tour of Africa, and when you start looking at some of those numbers, you got to pay attention to that marketplace. I look at Africa right now as being kind of the version of India where India was 20, 25 years ago. India is going to be certainly a big part of the equation of solving the challenges here. But even India is going to see a new talent, new workers coming into the talent pool start to decline in the next 10 years. And so those things are going to be challenging, but there's lots of different dynamics in play. I don't want to put it all into one simple answer because it's not. It's a lot of moving parts into the equation. Okay. Another question here: how should we approach the business process services as a GIC or a GBS organization? Maybe using broader terms here, GBS.
Yeah, I mean, see, there's no wrong or right answer to this. It really depends. Again, with any of these things, we ought to start with, hey, what is our organizational objective, right? And then also think about, as an organization, what is that we are willing to compromise on? What are the things that we emphasize more versus less, right? So again, to answer a specific question, yeah, GIC and GBS is a pretty valid option. And there are some large organizations who have adopted it, who have scaled it, that are capturing significant value, right? There are organizations who have done some of it and then outsourced, right? There are organizations who have leveraged third party to kind of set up some of the GICs for sure, right? And then some of those elements are also happening. So again, very difficult to give a kind of a straight answer here. It really depends on the context, objective, the criticality, all those elements. But yeah, I mean, GIC, GBS, definitely a valid option to consider as part of any sourcing strategy. Well,
and the GBSs are now using outsourcing as part of their solution as well, too. So I mean, it's not like it's one or the other. It's a cohesive, integrated strategy that you're looking for.
No, absolutely. Actually, good that you called out, because that's the place where we need to kind of differentiate between what is a shared services GIC versus GBS, right? GBS can be the orchestrator and are emerging as orchestrator, right? So yeah, thanks for calling that out.
All right, I got another simple question for you. I put simple in quotes here, okay? What are the major obstacles that prevent organizations to quickly adopt digital solutions? So let me hit one answer, and I'll give you time to think about how you want to go after it. One of the challenges I've seen out there is we can't find the talent to implement the talent saving projects. So it's a chicken and the egg type thing. I need to hire more people so I can save resources.
Yeah, I mean, I'll invite Prashant to also touch upon, right? Because some of the challenges that he highlighted on the intelligent automation side, I mean, conceptually similar set of challenges kind of flows into any digital initiative, right? So Prashant, do you want to comment on that?
No, absolutely. And yes, Rajesh, I mean, as you said, and that's one of the change management things we are talking about today, is that there are multiple stakeholders involved in such initiatives, right? And there has to be an alignment when it comes to buy-ins from the very top, right? And it's most of the times it's not about the technology or the digital tool itself. It's about the conviction which the leadership has and the kind of alignment with the whole, which the whole organization has to adopt new technology. So yeah, that's the way I would read it. Unless Rajesh, you have something to add there.
No, absolutely. Again, seldom it is about tools and technologies, right? Always it is about, whether you have the right, buy-in, you have the right alignment, right? Very clear, very important. And then, of course, you have the right set of people on that.
All right, one final question I'll try to sneak in here. Does the landscape of contract terms change as the model does? So example, COLA, automatic increases, short-term lengths moving back from outcome to T&M. How are you seeing some of those the contract terms besides the one that you highlighted today?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So yeah, I mean, one has to kind of think about, again, this entire contracting part differently. You can't have different outcomes by using the same approach, right? And this is the place where incentives and penalties and all the things really kick in, right? This is the place where rubber meets the road in one way or other. So yeah, I mean, we talked about the commercial model, there are various variants there, but so for example, if you think about the contract duration, right? Hey, is it 2 to 3 years good enough? Not really. This magic can't happen overnight. 7 years required, possibly no, because the things are going to change significantly. So there's somewhere in between. That's a duration standpoint. But the key point is, what I've seen in the past is a kind of a rigid sort of contract, right? What we need to create, and is important, to again bring agility into that contract, right? Because the reality, guys, is the world is changing fast, right? You don't want to be stuck. You think you got a pretty good deal and you have this ironclad contract, that rigidity will prevent harnessing the innovation that is happening in the ecosystem, harnessing the innovation that the provider can bring into the equation, which is going to be a win-win. So how do we kind of think about that? It becomes very, very critical, Michael.
All right, Rajesh, let's close on that, because I think that's maybe a potential next webinar topic is how do you build agility into your contract, and
yeah.
And what is the agility that you're actually trying to solve for? Because that's I think that's part of the challenge right now is, the talent issue kind of crept up on us. People were kind of blaming initial ones on the COVID, and I don't think it's COVID that's causing our big challenge right now. It's those immovable demographic trends that I've been talking about. So how are we going to build the agility into our contracts going forward? I think that's
yeah. I mean, I just add, one is the talent, which are very important, but the second is the speed of technology and tools, right? And the opportunity that will continue to present to us to harness it as and when, you don't want to be left behind. That's money left on the table by, being this ironclad contract that I cannot move around, I cannot incent.
All right, guys, fantastic discussion today. Thank you for your time. I want to also remind folks that this is, as I said earlier, this is part of a series that we're focusing in on over the next 2 months. And what we're trying to do is hit the different stakeholders. So you saw the one today focused on BPS, but we have one coming up on IT, one on outsourcing pricing, sourcing and vendor management, and ESG or impact sourcing, all scheduled to happen in the next 2 months. So stay tuned. And if you have any questions, please get in touch with Rajesh, myself, or Prashant. And with that, we thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.